Okay, who are we picking on today to be our people in the story?
What is the story?
Bob looks villainous.
Okay. Bob and Chaim.
Why not?
So Chaim is an old retiree, living in Eretz Yisrael, has his new place, new apartment, and he's had spent some time doing real estate, and he's got built a nice complex in Indianapolis, and Bob is a young business entrepreneur, setting out to make some big deals. He's interested in the real estate industry.
Why not?
And they make a good shidduch. Chaim says he's ready to sell his big one of his big estates in Indianapolis, as we all know, real estate hub. Chaim has a nice estate, multi-family homes, a couple buildings, nice private area, close to main whatever, a few $1 million. They make an agreement, and they sign. Shortly before closing, unbeknownst to them, there was a break-in, and a group of young teenagers discovered this newly built these newly built homes. They took advantage. They broken windows, parties, different things, dogs, dog fighting, all types of stuff. Got some serious damage. So
who still owns it now?
Bob, on his next trip, so shortly after that, unbeknownst to them, they go into closing day, everything's smooth, everyone's happy, everyone got the deal they wanted, and only a few weeks later, Bob makes it out to Indianapolis, goes to his estate, and realizes,
Oops.
wow.
I mean, isn't there some part of due diligence to prevent that kind of thing from happening?
Due diligence on whose part?
The buyer?
Right.
On the buyer. Yeah.
So we're both in Eretz Yisrael, part of the case, and you had it checked out, at the time that you decided to buy. There's not necessarily a requirement for you to
Did the seller
to do
have
further.
any management
It might be
people on-
wise.
Did the seller have any management people on site?
So no, it wasn't occupied. It was a new building, and everything needed to be finalized and approved and inspected before they start renting out to tenants and everything, or selling, whatever the case is. But you checked it out, but you didn't check it out right before. It wasn't right before, and in those last couple weeks, there was a lot of damage. So the question is, what happens now? Bob says, I'm not interested. This is it's not the deal that I'm interested in anymore. It's got all types of problems now. I need new windows here. I need a new door here. I need new floors over here. This needs a painting job. I don't want to deal with this headache. This is not what I was buying. I was purchasing, newly constructed, good quality buildings. And Chaim says back, we had a really good deal here, and I don't expect you to take it as is. Obviously, at the time that the damage happened, it was still in my possession, but I'll repair it for you, or I'll give you the money for the repairs, or I'll deduct it from the price. I understand that that's my responsibility, but we had a deal here, and I sold you a house. I sold you houses, whatever it was, buildings, and your estate will be as good as new after some money and on my part and some work, everything will be as you wanted it in the first place.
So could that be a condition of the closing?
Well, the closing, you already closed.
You're already closed.
You already closed.
You're already closed. Now,
Well, then you need a
if so,
separate-
that's a very important point. The timing. Only way we'll have a question is if the damage happened before the closing, and the closing already took place at the time. So that's why I made the case that you're in Eretz Yisrael. You can't just go back and forth. You came back after your first trip to Indianapolis a few weeks after closing, excited to see your new buildings, and that's what you discover. So the closing already happened, and the question is, was that closing binding? Right? We discussed last week. We brought up the concept of, or last time, the concept of mekach toes. The idea that if a transaction was built on some type of false pretense, there was some important information that was being assumed when they made up this deal, then that can uproot the sale, or whatever the matter is. It's something that applies to really all areas of transactions. It applies to Kiddushin, to marriage. It applies to renting. It applies to buying land. It applies to buying movable items.
So how could they figure out when the damage actually happened?
Well, that's not hard to figure out. They did a report and they checked it out. They saw. They had it.
So
on-
they know when they saw
found,
the damage,
They
but
found the cameras and they
There's a
got
police
it
report
checked
for the
out.
day after
There's a
the
police
closing.
report.
Oh, okay.
There's a
I
police
mean,
report.
I would think it's not. There's no false pretenses because it wasn't. I mean, false pretenses seems like there's some level of
Fraud.
Yeah, basically. I mean, the seller was
Intentional.
Right.
Was
So mekach toes doesn't have to be intentional. It doesn't have to be that someone is a fraud, someone is a ramai and trying to trick the other guy. Sometimes it could be. Sometimes it could be an honest mistake. But at the end of the day, if you sold me a product that's supposed to have X, Y, and Z and it doesn't, meaning you sold me a house that was supposed to have, a boiler, and you didn't realize that, the boiler broke or was in very bad condition and broke right after. So you weren't necessarily trying to trick me, but at the end of the day, that information was.
I mean, so it seems to me then, so fine. But the buyers or the seller's not trying to back out of it. I mean, he agrees. I'm obligated to pay for the
Right.
damage. So it seems to me like the deal's still, with good faith and good intention. I mean, it'd be like, if I damage your property anyways, I have to repair the damages. So
Is the
taken care
agreement to fix it in writing?
It doesn't need to be, because they agreed on, meaning the house that they agreed on was the house before the damages, not the house after the damages. So it's basically in writing without being in writing. Meaning it's in writing that
you're providing a new house.
that what Bob is buying from Chaim is a house that has windows, that has a floor that's working. That basically that was in the condition that the pictures had before it happened, or that the inspector saw before it happened. Bob wasn't just willing to buy anything. He sent out his guys. He got a good inspection, everything, and all of this happened afterwards. So everyone knew what was being purchased. And
Would the seller's insurance still pay?
so that would be a good question. Once we would get into insurance.
It's really unrelated though to whether or not it's a good deal though, right?
So right. So possibly it would be related. If we can, let's hold off without the insurance for a second and assume that just to deal with the main part of the case.
So is to clarify what the question is? The question whether or not Bob has to take the building?
So the question is this a mekach toes that Bob has the right to back out and say, I'm not interested in this deal anymore, and call the whole thing off? Or is Chaim's taina correct? Chaim's claim, which is that we had a deal here. There was a purchase of a house. It's still the house, or it's still the buildings, it's still the estate, it just needs some repair work, and I'll take the responsibility to cover that. So is that similar to, is that a mekach tos, basically? A mekach tos, there has to be something which is inherently different than what was understood to be the deal. Like the typical, most classic case, extreme case is the Gemara is yayin v'nim tzachometz. Someone bought a barrel of wine and it turned out it was really over its time it was ready vinegar. So that's like the classic. It's not the product I bought, right? That's like an obvious. That's like the simple case. That's not what I purchased. So would we say over here? The question really boils down to, would we say over here that also this is not what I purchased? I mean, there's clearly, they sent down Meridian Construction, to appraise it. We're talking, a few $1 million building, and damages are, still something to deal with. They said it would probably cost, $50,000 to, take care of the floors and the windows or whatever it is. So it's significant. In the overall scheme of things, though, it's definitely minor when you're dealing with a $4 or $5 million purchase of an estate. So the question is Chaim's claim is really that this is the product, it's just needs some repair work. It's not like I didn't provide you or you didn't really close on the product that it is. It's just it needs some repair. And once I'll get it to be what we agreed on, then everything is okay. And Bob's claim is, no, this is really essentially a new product because this has a lot of issues with it. I have broken floors, broken windows. This is not what I purchased.
Who has title now?
Who has
title?
You do. Bob has title.
So this is the question. Really, it's a little bit of it could be a broader question in areas of mekach tos. It could apply when someone's buying a car. Someone buys a car and first it has a problem with the windshield wiper, and then a problem with the wheels, and then a problem with the rotors, and then the brake pads, and then each thing.
Those purchases are contingent on approval.
Right.
I'll buy it from you, but if the shop says it's okay. It sounds like that's
right.
the case.
Right. Yes. So each time the shop or each time the seller is saying, of course, it's my responsibility. So he replaces it. Says it's okay.
Yeah.
We'll keep the sale. Don't worry. It's on me. And he replaces it. And then this breaks. And then that breaks. And then the engine breaks. And he says, oh, don't worry. That also has a warranty. That's also. At some point, does the buyer have the right to say, this is not the car that I bought?
Well, maybe it's a new car now.
It's a new car. It's your money.
Right. So when could the buyer say, this is not what I bought. I'm not interested in this anymore. Or could the seller say, well, you still have your gray Honda. We have to make a lot of changes.
Than a car situation, because a car is going to have wear and tear as you use it, whereas on the property, it will if people start using it, but that's...
Well, it could be like a new car that's a lemon.
That's true. That's true. But if Chaim's restoring it to its proper status, then to me it seems like it seems valid.
Well, yeah, so 100%, this question is only going to be a question if the seller has the capability of doing a full-fledged repair, that it will be no worse than it was what they agreed on. If there is going to have to be some compromise over here, oh, well, we can't do that type of repair because of this, and in between, we didn't get the zoning, so we can't do that repair, or whatever type of issue would come up, that Chaim would not be able to provide the exact same product that was originally agreed on, there's no question at all. Then certainly Bob would have the right to back out, and there would be no question. The only place where we would have this question is when the repair is fully doable, he's fully capable of it, he's ready to do it, and the buyer's just not interested anymore for whatever reason.
If the ability of the buyer to rent out property or rent out apartments or whatever, condos, whatever the thing is delayed so that he's losing a substantial sum, is that on the seller?
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So that's a very good point. So Bob is saying that even if Chaim could do a perfect job, but what if that's going to delay? What if that's going to delay his business? A significant amount of time. He was planning on getting some tenants in, within the next couple months, and this is going to set him back. Another whatever it will be, 6 months. So even if Chaim could get it back to what it was, he's going to lose out. Now, if that's the case, then that definitely will throw a wrench into things. You should be able to say that Chaim should be able to say, Bob should be able to say that it's essentially different because I'm losing out on 6 months rent. And presumably that would be equivalent to Chaim not being able to do the repairs.
Unless Chaim would defray that cost.
Right. And then the question would be at what point it's worth it. But that's another important limitation.
What that amount would be, because you wouldn't know what the occupancy you could attain at that
Yeah, I
point in
know.
time.
Right. So we've limited our case over here to it's going to have to be that Chaim is going to provide an equal product. It's going to have to be that he's providing it in a way that there's not a severe loss. And the question is, can Bob still say, I'm not interested. This is not the product that I purchased. So to try to deal with this general issue, like I said, it really is broader. You could have it by a car, you could have it by a piece of furniture, you could have it by electronic. You could have it by anything where you'll have this question that.
I'll tell you what once happened with a company that I was associated with. I was working with them in New Hampshire, and their parent company, which was in Switzerland, bought a property in Texas that they were going to make into a sister plant to provide products to the other plant. So they had one of the stipulations was a new building had to be put up because we had good knowledge, which I had gotten by being on the site and talking to a certain engineer, that the building was in horrible shape and they had buried toxic waste on the site and there was all kinds of problems. So, but they agreed. They started building this new thing, putting up the new building, and it was going to be all right. One day I'm in the office in New Hampshire and everybody's going bonkers. They found out that the seller who had owned that other property was burying his toxic waste from the old site onto the new one. So they demoted him, but they didn't get rid of him altogether, but they demoted him at least. And they ultimately they forced him to undig it or remove it back again.
Wow. Wow. Wow, interesting.
This is when I learned not to trust this guy.
This was after you bought the property after you dealt with Chaim.
Yeah. Well,
Since
whatever,
after you went through
yeah,
that.
In other words,
Before it.
This was a clear-cut situation where the terms were violated and intentionally hoping he would get away with it.
Right. Right. Okay, so back to our case with Honest Bob and Honest Chaim, who are each, taking their case to the Torah and trying to figure out what to do over here. So, where can we glean from whether, essentially the question boils down to, does a repair allow the seller to hold on to the sale and say that this essentially is the item that I'm selling to you, or does the fact that it's a different product right now before repair say that this is not the same product and therefore it's batel? So one place where we could maybe glean an answer to our question is in a different area of halacha, but it has the same essential backbone of mekach toes, is marriage. Gemara has a lot of different cases in Masechus Kesubos about different blemishes that either a husband can find with a wife or a wife can find with a husband after the Kiddushin, after they did the formal acquisition. And there's a lot of discussion which cases can
After Nisuim or Kiddushin?
simple. It talks about both cases, but for now the simple case is after Kiddushin.
Okay.
After Kiddushin, which is the first part of marriage, which is a legal acquisition, it's binding. It's not like a engagement. It's a actual kinyan. It's putting the ring on the finger.
Is there a real inspection in that case? Or
So there is inspection in that case. That's a very good point. The Gemara says that you'll only have these claims when a person either wasn't able to do an inspection or is a case, right, the minhag of that place is that they don't do inspection. But that's a very good point, that whenever there's going to be an inspection before, that's going to limit the cases. But when the Gemara goes at length to discuss cases where there was not able to be inspection, or the blemish was in something which was an area which was not able to be inspected, something what the Gemara calls dvarim shebeseser, a private thing. So the Gemara brings a brisa which says a very interesting halacha. One of the types of blemishes that a woman could have is she has vows. She took nedarim. And nedarim, the Talmud talks about a lot, how severe they are. It can cause, children to die, all different types of things. It's very, very severe. And a husband that finds out that his wife is, has vows on her, that can be a very serious issue for him. And that can be a mekach. So the Gemara says that if she had a vow, but before her husband finds out, she goes to the Chacham. After the Kiddushin, she goes, I have this vow. So she goes to the Chacham, to the Bezdin, or whatever it is, and she does Hataras Nedarim. And she gets rid of her vow. She had a perfect Hataras Nedarim. And then they go through and do the marriage. So the Gemara says that her Kiddushin is valid. And it contrasts it to a case where she had a physical mum, let's say either some type of illness or some type of actually like physical blemish somewhere on her body, some type of mum, and she also, before her husband finds out, she goes to the doctor or whoever it is, and she gets it taken care of. And it's as if it wasn't there. It was healed, fully healed. So the Gemara says, Eina Mekudeshes, that the Kiddushin is not valid. The Gemara asks, why? What's the difference between the cases? So the Gemara answers that Hataras Nedarim works retroactively. It makes it that you had charata, you regretted taking the vow, and it works retroactively, like we all remember from Erev Rosh Hashanah. It's going retroactively and saying that I had regret on my original taking of this vow, and it's a process without going into all the details that works to make it as if it was never taken, as if the vow was never taken. As opposed to the mum, whatever blemish it was, so it existed at the time of the Kiddushin. It's true a few months later, she got rid of it. At the time of the transaction, it was there. Says the brisa, therefore, the Kiddushin is invalid. Now that is very similar to what we're talking about over here.
Could the husband in this situation say after the repair that it's okay now, or it's invalid anyway?
Yes, he can. He would probably need to do another Kiddushin though. He would need to redo the Kiddushin because it depends on the case, but he would need to redo the Kiddushin. And if he would want to back out, he would be able to back out. Because it's a mekach. At the time of the Kiddushin, there was a mum. That's what the Gemara says.
That's your parallel then to the
So presumably that should be a good raya to our case. Over here we're talking about a repair. The doctor did a repair. Chaim's construction team did a repair. And what do we see? We see that even though she's good as new, at the time her husband found out about it, at the time that was relevant, that the Kiddushin was still not valid because it wasn't the same item that he purchased, so to speak. It wasn't the wife that he acquired. There was something different.
But if it's an improved thing compared to the original, then what?
That would be a different question. But here we're just removal of a blemish. if the blemish was there, it wouldn't matter, what he did to improve it. If the blemish was there at the time that the Kiddushin took place. Says the Ree Megash. The Ree Megash is one of the earliest Rishonim that we have. He is someone that was very influential on the Rambam. It's very, very early. He was a Talmud of the Rif, and he has a tshuva about our topic. And he says, he brings a raya, he brings a proof from this case. From this case of the woman, he says, we see from here that since, even though it was repaired, since at the time of the Kiddushin, at the time he married her, she had the mum, it is a problem. So too, the house, he's dealing with a house, not exactly our case yet, he's dealing with a house that was supposed to have a good floor. They used to have dirt floors. It was supposed to have a nice smooth floor, and it had holes in it, and was not an even floor. It required a lot of floor work. Says the Ree Megash, even though the seller says, I'll fix the floor 100%, that it'll be exactly how it's supposed to be, since at the time of the sale it was not yet a usable floor, or the floor as it's supposed to be, therefore it is a mekach. That is the Ree Megash. Now it's fascinating, once we get to the Ree Megash, we open up his tshuva, he categorizes our question into 3 different types of cases. And really he says that the case that we dealt with is the most complicated case. Of course we're going to choose the most complicated case. But he says there's really 3 categories. One case is that really it's not really a mum in the what he calls the guf habayis in the house itself. It's, let's say that he says there's a river going through that you didn't know about, or a stream going through that you didn't know about, or some puddles, some marsh or whatever that you didn't know was on the property, that needs to be dealt with. It's not good for whoever bought it, and that's one type. So he says there for sure repair works. He says there repair works. The seller can say, don't worry about it. The house is, everything's good. The estate is good.
It was unbeknownst to him when he.
It was unbeknownst to him.
But it's not the house itself. It's the land.
Right. Or a similar type of a case is there's some type of cut through. Other types of cases like that. The Ree Megash says those are not essentially a different product. Really, it's essentially the same product. There's just a side issue. It's true, the issue is the problem of the seller, and if he doesn't take care of it, that will nullify the sale. But as long as the seller goes and takes care of the issue, the sale goes through. That's category number 1. Category number 2, says the Ree Megash, is where you have a real panim, what he calls a panim chadashus. Panim chadashus is a concept that comes up really in the Gemara and Shabbos and the halachas of utensils.
Sounds like shiur brachos too.
Comes also by shiur brachos, right? Very, very different concepts. That's the same term is used. But the Ree Megash takes the idea that when something gets reconstructed so much that basically there was a point that it didn't exist as a kli, or over here it didn't really exist as a house, even though you come out with a perfect product, even better than it was, or equal than what it was supposed to be, that wasn't the thing that was bought. So his example is, let's say a wall was supposed to be a good wall, and it wasn't. There was a wall, or let's say a beam that is essential for holding up the house, something that is needed for the construction of the house, and it was supposed to be steel, and it was something else. It was whatever the issue was. Something was eroded that wasn't supposed to be eroded. There's need for a major construction. So even though the seller is willing to take that upon himself and go through the construction, basically redo, do some serious construction on this house, and at the end of the day, the buyer's going to get a perfectly new, great product. Not for a penny more.
Yeah.
But it's not what he purchased.
He's going to get a better product.
He'll get a better product, but it's not what he purchased. He purchased, at the time of the sale, it didn't exist. It's a panim chadash, it's a new item, it's a new house. And if he wants, they could redo it. But if the buyer decides, I'm not interested anymore, I found another deal, or I want to back out for whatever reason, it says the Ree Megash, that is very simple case. He says our case is the most complicated because it is not now he's talking again about broken floors. So he says broken floors, the essential product does exist. The essential house does exist. We don't view it like a completely new house.
Because
the
the
fact
dirt
that you
floor
fixed
isn't
the floor.
part of the structure itself.
That seems to be his main point. I would wonder if that could be extended, but yes, at least that. And he says in that case, that's where it starts to be more complicated. Do you say, well, it's not a completely new item; it is essentially the same item, and therefore he proved what the answer would be from this Gemara in Kesubos about the woman with the blemish, and says you see over there that even if it's not a completely new item, but it's a repair that's in the essence of what's being purchased, or in that case, in the essence of what is being married, that is going to be batal also. That's the Ree Megash.
Sorry, I came in a little late.
Yeah.
When he bought the house, it had a dirt floor, but he was promised a real floor?
So the case that we're talking about is that the buyer, they agreed on a house and it was vandalized shortly before closing.
Lost its floor.
It was vandalized and windows were broken and floors were different things were messed up,
gotcha.
basically.
Got it. Okay.
And they discovered it after the closing.
Got it.
That's the case we're dealing with.
Okay.
So that's the Ree Megash. If you look though on the page, Tosus and the Rosh have a big problem in that Gemara, because there's a later brisa, and the brisa says that if it's the equivalent thing by a man, right? We said it could go both ways. He could say that's not what I married, and she could say that's not what I married. But it says in the brisa that if he has a physical illness or some other type of defect, and he gets it fixed, he gets it healed, before her noticing, possibly after for a technical reason, but he gets it fixed in time, then it says that it works. So Tosus is bothered. Well, clearly she's makbid about it. Clearly she cares about this defect, because it only says it works because he got it removed, because he got it healed. But at the same time, he didn't heal it at the time. He didn't heal it retroactively, right? He only healed it later in time. So why does the Kiddushin work? So because of that, Tosus reinterprets the Gemara. And Tosus and the Rosh. Everyone has to keep track of the names in this year. It's going to be very important in the climax here. So Tosus and the Rosh, they both say that the Gemara is because of this year they changed shot on the Gemara. They say that what it means is that when it's retroactively, since a neder is retroactively removed, therefore he doesn't care about it now. But a mum that his wife had, he cares about it even after it was removed. She's nemesis be'enov, Tosus and the Rosh say, even after it was removed. She had this issue, and it was, now it was healed, but it was not, at the time that they did the deal, it wasn't, at the time of the Kiddushin, it existed. And Tosus says he's still bothered by it now. That's why it's a problem. But a woman is not bothered by it. Why? Why? There's a concept.
She needs marriage more than the guy does.
So there's a concept of the Gemara. The Gemara has a phrase called "Tavla Mesav Tendum Mesav Armala," that a woman is more. It's more important to her not to be on her own, basically, than it is for a man. Even though the Gemara says it's important to a man also, but a woman is more, so to speak, desperate not to be in the situation of being alone.
Interesting.
Therefore, she will have a little bit less of a hakpada. She'll be a little bit less stringent about it. She still won't agree to marry him if he has it, but if he removed it by the time they get, they do the second stage of marriage, she at that point will completely drop it. Whereas the man, the assumption is that he will not completely drop it, and therefore it is a problem. Now, if we think about this and we try to apply it back to our case, with the Ree Megash Raya, everything flips over on its head. Everything flips the opposite, right? Because now Tosfos is saying, really the guiding principle is that even something which existed at the time of the marriage, if it's repairable, and it could be completely repaired, a complete repair, that the other party will be completely happy with the new product, then it's good. Then it's kayam. Then the sale's good. It's only a problem in a case where even after it's repaired, there's still not going to be 100% satisfaction. So what would result from Tosfos is, seemingly, in our case, that the sale is Chaim. That Chaim can say to Bob, this is what we agreed on. This is your estate now. You owe me the $5 million, I owe you the repairs. That's what would come out from Tosfos. Now, why I was saying it's important to keep the names, the Rosh also goes with Tosfos' approach in the Gemara. And the Rosh has a tshuva. The Rosh was asked basically our question. Now, I'm laughing at myself because we discovered a Rosh that answered the whole reason that we're talking about this case in the first place is because the Rosh has a tshuva on it. But the Rosh has.
You have to make it more mysterious.
Yeah, exactly, right. But the Rosh has basically this case. The Rosh has a case where a person they bought land overseas. They bought an estate with a bunch of houses. It was vandalized in between signing and closing, and the guy comes in after closing and he's excited for his house, and it was vandalized. And the Rosh says the house was intact, but the windows were broken, some of the doors were broken, and they lit a lot of fires. They didn't burn anything down, but the whole house is smoky and black. There needs completely new painting. There's black stuff on the walls, and basically it needs a big repair. And that was the case that was presented to the Rosh. So if this case was presented to the Ree Megash, presumably the Ree Megash would say that it's no good. It's not a good sale. It wasn't the same product. It's a problem in the house itself. It's a problem in the house, just like a problem in the woman. It's on her guf. It's a disease that she has. So this is a problem in the house. The house is lacking windows. The house has dirty walls. The house has smoked up ceilings. So that's presumably what the Ree Megash would say. However, the Rosh says, and this is the same Rosh that should be Lishitasa from Kesubos, the Rosh says, in fact, that it is Kayam, that the sale is good. And this Rosh goes together with the Rosh in Kesubos, that is saying that shot in the Gemara, that it's only a problem that's going to nullify if the repair is not able to be a full repair that he'll be happy with after the repair, that the buyer will be satisfied with. But if it will present full satisfaction, says the Rosh, it's a mum over. It's just a temporary thing, and once it will be cleaned up and taken care of, then you have the same house that you bought, and therefore so seemingly at the end of the day, in our case, according to the Ree Megash, he would paskin in favor of Chaim. In favor of Bob that the sale is nullified, and the Rosh would pass in favor of Chaim that the sale is not nullified. If you look in Shulchan Aruch and Reish Lamed Beis, so Shulchan Aruch just brings down the view of the Rosh. No one brought down the view of the Ree Megash.
How long after the Ree Megash did the Rosh live?
Quite a long time, actually. The Ree Megash is probably a few hundred years, probably more than 300 years.
So had he been aware of the Ree Megash's argument?
I don't know if he had a Chuvas Ree Megash. I would be surprised if he did. He didn't have the library that we have here. But you're asking, would he change his mind if he saw it? So probably not, because if we understand correctly, his psak, his ruling is based on the way that he the Ree Megash's whole proof was based on the way that he learned the Gemara in Kesubos.
Okay, so since the Rosh learned
And
it
the Rosh
differently,
learned the Gemara like Tosfos, which is a different way of learning the Gemara, and really the psak should follow from there.
All right.
So final ruling, it would seem that according to the Shulchan Aruch, we would rule like the Rosh, and the sale would still be Chaim. Again, you could go on and on, going into all the details of at what point, even in the Rosh, is it right? Even in Shulchan Aruch, that's only because windows and painting is not such a big deal. But it says if it would be something more significant, if it would be that the walls need to be broken down and reconstructed, and it says in Shulchan Aruch, like the Rosh says, going with the Rosh also, that there everyone would agree. So in every case, you have to judge: is this a new item? Let's say the case we mentioned before, the boiler doesn't work, so you need a new boiler. So I mean that's significant. Does that mean the house it's like a completely new house? What if the floor needs to be completely redone?
When we moved in here, very quickly the air conditioner system died, but they gave us an allowance.
So that would be a very good case also. That maybe we would consider in the hot summer it's not even livable without
Yeah, it was August.
under normal conditions.
Like the first night we were there, the thing broke.
Wow.
Does the Rosh factor in what's good for the economy? Does that factor in at all? Because this is good for business. We like to see business. It's good for the community. Or is that irrelevant to his svara?
Is it good for vandals?
So
but I mean, the deal went through. In other words, I can be a stickler and say,
So-
forget it, I'm out of here.
So there are times where Chazal stepped in and made takanas, made certain institutions to change the halacha from what a typical would be in monetary matters in order to, sustain what you're talking about the general economy. But those are rare specific situations, and in general, unless we know about a specific thing the Gemara talks about, then it's just what the pure halacha is,
The Rosh
and
was
it's not
thinking
it's
the
not
halacha,
gonna,
he was
pure
not
purely
thinking
in the halacha. It's not going to be
Geschäft is
affected.
geschäft.
Right.
Would it be different if the squatters were still on the property?
It would be different only in that if it will be a hard process to get them off, that could contribute to how severe the damage is to say that, this is actually worse damage. Now that it's such bad damage, maybe this is like a completely different product. Meaning,
I mean, before you got into the real detail, I was thinking maybe a Mexican drug gang, was taking it over or something.
right? That could be the case.
That
Maybe
could-
I should have
that could-
given that case
That could
instead.
have been a problem.
Yeah.
So, but what if, Bob is like, so the generally accepted construction standard is that you replace the window, it's as good as new. Everybody accepts it, but Bob's like, no matter what, it's not good enough for me. Or is he obligated, according to the Rosh, to say, look, everybody says this is acceptable, it's the same thing, so now you're basically being ridiculous.
Right. So personal preferences on what he considers livable or not would be irrelevant unless he stipulated them at the time of the sale. That's generally the principle. If he wants to stipulate whatever he wants at the time of the sale, he could go ahead and do so. He could say that if he finds a speck of dust, the deal is off. Now, no one's going to want to work with him, but if he wants to make such a stipulation, he can make whatever stipulation he wants. As long as they agree, that'll be fine. But if it was not stipulated, then it's going to be dependent on what society deals with as a mum. Something which is severe enough that it must be repaired.